An extra $900 a month doesn't feel life-changing until you stretch it across 10 years. That's $108,000. And that's before you calculate what that money could have become if it had stayed invested inside a 401k, a Roth IRA, or even a simple brokerage account. But no one feels the weight of $108,000 when they're standing in a bright kitchen with quartz countertops, soft close cabinets, and a mortgage broker sliding paperwork across the table. It starts in a way that feels reasonable. You get a raise, maybe from $78,000 to $92,000. Your direct deposit notification hits your phone on a Friday morning, and for the first time in a while, your checking account looks comfortable, not extravagant, just stable. That weekend, you and your spouse scroll Zillow. The two-bedroom apartment with the thin walls, and the neighbor who argues at midnight suddenly feels temporary. You tell yourselves, we can finally afford more space. A few weeks later, the numbers line up. Like this mortgage payment, $2,650 instead of $1,850 in rent. Property taxes and insurance folded in. Utilities slightly higher. That's roughly $800 more per month. Then comes the car. Your old Honda is paid off, but it's 8 years old. You're doing better now. You test drive a new SUV. The dealership smells like leather and coffee. The salesperson says, with your income, this is completely manageable. The payment, $620 per month. You trade in the old car. The payment replaces no payment. It feels like an upgrade, not a subtraction. Add faster internet, a few more streaming subscriptions. Lawn care because you're busier now. Maybe a gym membership closer to the new house. Another $150. Individually, none of these feel extreme. Together, they total about $900 more per month than your old life. At first, nothing breaks. You can still contribute to your 401k, though maybe not as aggressively. You still pay your credit cards in full. You're not irresponsible. In fact, this looks like progress. But here's what changed, and it doesn't show up on the mortgage statement. Before, your monthly obligations were lighter. If you lost your job, you could stretch savings further. If you wanted to take 6 months off, the math wasn't terrifying. If a startup opportunity came along at a lower salary, it was at least discussable. Now your fixed costs are higher. Your life requires your current income. And when your life requires your current income, your career stops being optional. The comfort feels good. The house is quiet. The car is smooth. The neighborhood feels safe. But the structure underneath your life just became heavier. And heavy structures don't move easily. At first, the upgrade doesn't feel like risk. It feels like growth. You didn't stretch irresponsibly. The bank approved the mortgage. The dealership ran the credit check. Your debt-to-income ratio looked fine on paper. You even told yourself you were being conservative, and technically, you were. The problem isn't the math on the day you sign. It's what the math does to your decisions afterward. A few months into the new house, the higher payment no longer feels new. It feels normal. The $2,650 mortgage drafts automatically from your checking account. You stop noticing it. Psychologists call this adaptation. Financially, it's more specific than that. It's income anchoring. Your brain recalibrates around the new number required to maintain your lifestyle. If your household now needs $7,200 per month to operate instead of $5,800, that higher number becomes your baseline survival figure. Not survival in the dramatic sense. Structural survival, the amount required to keep the lights on, the mortgage paid, the car in the driveway, and the health insurance active. And once that baseline rises, something subtle shifts at work. You sit in a meeting on a Tuesday afternoon. Your manager announces restructuring. Nothing dramatic, just strategic realignment. Normally, you'd evaluate your options calmly, maybe even consider looking elsewhere. But now your brain runs a different calculation. Mortgage, car payment, insurance, property taxes, utilities. Your monthly burn rate is no longer abstract, it's concrete. A few years ago, you could have tolerated instability. You had lower fixed obligations. You had more cash flow flexibility. You could absorb a few months of uncertainty. Now uncertainty feels expensive. This is how comfort converts into career pressure. It doesn't happen because you're greedy. It happens because fixed costs demand reliability, and reliability requires predictability, which usually means staying where you are. Meanwhile, your raise from $78,000 to $92,000 feels smaller than it did on paper, because most of it has already been assigned, pre-allocated, committed. Your lifestyle expanded to match your income. That expansion felt earned. But expansion has a side effect. It reduces maneuverability. Think about the difference between canceling Netflix, selling a house, breaking a lease, trading in a financed car with negative equity. Some costs are flexible, others are structural. Structural costs reshape behavior. 5 years ago, if a friend invited you to join a small business venture with uncertain income for the first year, you might have at least run the numbers. Now, you close the spreadsheet halfway through. It's not the right time. Maybe it isn't, but notice what's doing the deciding. Not your ambition, not your risk tolerance, your monthly obligations. Comfort doesn't remove freedom in one dramatic moment. It narrows your acceptable range of outcomes. And when the acceptable range narrows, so does your willingness to change. A few years later, this narrowing becomes harder to see, because by then it just feels responsible. 5 years pass faster than you expect. The house doesn't feel new anymore. It feels normal. The SUV has 62,000 miles on it. The monthly payments are automatic, predictable, invisible in their repetition. But the structure has solidified. Now there's a second car payment, not extravagant, just practical. Maybe $480 a month for your spouse's vehicle. The old one needed repairs, and with 2 commutes, reliability mattered. Health insurance premiums have risen. Property taxes adjusted upward. Utilities creep higher. Groceries cost more than they did in 2021. Your monthly fixed expenses, once $900 higher than your old life, are now closer to $1,200 higher. Nothing dramatic happened, just accumulation. Meanwhile, your income has grown too. You're making $105,000 now. Maybe $115,000 household combined. On paper, you're ahead. But here's where the divergence begins. Let's compare 2 versions of you from 5 years ago. Version A kept the smaller apartment a little longer. Drove the paid-off car another 4 years. Invested the extra $1,200 per month consistently. Split between a 401k, Roth IRA, and a brokerage account. $1,200 per month for 5 years is $72,000 in contributions alone. With modest market growth, let's say 7% annually, that account could reasonably be sitting around $85,000 to $90,000. That's not early retirement money, but it's leverage. It's the ability to leave a job without panic, the ability to survive a layoff for a year, the ability to take a lower-paying role with better upside. Now look at version B, the path of expanded comfort. That $1,200 wasn't wasted. It bought space, safety, convenience, a smoother commute, a backyard. But it didn't accumulate. It converted into lifestyle. 5 years later, version B might have $25,000 in savings, a growing 401k, but contributing just enough for the company match. 2 car loans, a mortgage that still feels large. Again, nothing. Irresponsible. But the structural difference is significant. Version A has optionality funded by assets. Version B has stability funded by income. And stability funded by income is fragile if income stops. Here's where it becomes behavioral. You're sitting at your desk at 8:47 p.m. The office is quieter now. Or if you're remote, your laptop is still open on the dining table. Slack notifications keep blinking. You could push back. You could say no to the extra project. But the cost of friction feels higher than it used to. Because your life now depends on continuity. You're not staying late because you love overwork. You're staying because interruption feels expensive. 5 years of expanded comfort didn't make you reckless. It made you committed. Committed to maintaining the structure you built. And structures, once built, demand maintenance. 10 years into this pattern, nothing looks unstable. From the outside, it looks successful. You have equity in the house. The neighborhood has appreciated. Your income is higher than it's ever been. Maybe $125,000, maybe more. Your LinkedIn profile looks solid. Your resume shows promotions. But your life is now calibrated around a specific level of income. The $900 monthly upgrade from a decade ago? It's no longer $900. Property taxes increased. Insurance premiums climbed. Maintenance showed up. A new roof estimate in your inbox for $14,000. HVAC replacement. $9,800. The SUV was replaced again. The new one costs even more. Now the structural difference between your old life and your current one is closer to $1,500 per month. Over 10 years, that's $180,000 in additional cash flow, redirected toward maintaining comfort. If that $1,500 had been invested monthly at a conservative 7% return, you're approaching $260,000. That's not a fantasy number. That's a down payment on freedom. It's a multi-year runway. It's negotiating power. But instead of existing in an account statement, that money exists in granite countertops, upgraded trim packages, and square footage. Again, none of those are mistakes. The cost is just different than it first appeared. Here's the invisible shift that happens by year 10. Your tolerance for instability drops dramatically. A recruiter calls with an interesting role. Lower base salary, higher upside, startup environment. 10 years ago, you would have been curious. Now you calculate quickly. Mortgage, 2 vehicles, family health insurance, after-school programs, homeowners association dues, rising grocery bills, streaming services you barely think about. Your monthly obligations require precision. Risk feels irresponsible, even if it's rational. You open your banking app and glance at your savings. It's not empty, but it's not liberating either. It's protective, defensive, designed to absorb small shocks, not major transitions. And so your decisions become narrower. You optimize within the structure. You negotiate raises instead of reimagining direction. You tolerate corporate politics instead of exiting them. You delay ideas instead of testing them. The structure you built for comfort now defines the boundaries of your ambition. And here's the critical part. It doesn't feel like a trap. It feels like adulthood. It feels responsible, stable, mature. But responsibility without flexibility can quietly become dependency. You're not owned by debt collectors. You're owned by continuity. By this point, it's tempting to frame the story as a warning against houses, cars, or comfort itself. That would be simplistic. Comfort isn't the villain. The house gave you space. The car gave you reliability. The neighborhood gave you safety. The upgrades reduced friction in your daily life. Those things matter. The real issue isn't what you bought, it's what you exchanged. Because every fixed monthly obligation is a contract with your future self. Not a dramatic contract, not something you sign in a separate room, but a structural one. When your baseline cost of living rises, you don't just increase spending, you decrease acceptable uncertainty. And that trade compounds over time. Look at your calendar. It's fuller than it used to be. Work bleeds into evenings more often. You check email on Sunday just to stay ahead. You tell yourself it's temporary, just this quarter, just this deadline. But the underlying reason isn't urgency. It's maintenance. Maintenance of the structure. If your household requires $9,000 a month to operate, then maintaining income becomes a central organizing principle of your life. Career decisions become less about curiosity and more about stability. You don't notice the shift in identity. You start describing yourself differently. I can't take that risk right now. We have too many obligations. Maybe in a few years. Those statements are not about courage. They're about structure. Meanwhile, someone with lower fixed obligations, not lower ambition, not higher intelligence, simply has more room to experiment. They can tolerate a salary dip. They can endure a transition. They can walk away from a toxic manager without calculating the exact number of weeks until savings run dry. Freedom, in financial terms, is rarely dramatic. It's the ability to absorb volatility. And volatility becomes intolerable when fixed costs are high. Here's the uncomfortable realization. The long-term cost of choosing comfort over freedom isn't measured only in dollars. It's measured in decisions you never seriously consider. Business ideas you don't test, cities you don't move to, careers you don't pivot toward, time you don't reclaim. None of those show up on a bank statement, but they shape a life. If this perspective is helping you see your own structure more clearly, take a moment to like the video. And if you want more conversations like this, grounded in real American financial life, subscribe to the channel. Now here's the final shift. Freedom isn't about rejecting comfort. It's about understanding that every recurring expense quietly defines your range of motion. Comfort feels good today. Freedom feels abstract. But 10 years from now, the difference between the two won't be philosophical. It will be structural. And structure, once built, is very hard to redesign. Here's what makes this difficult. At no point did you make a reckless decision. You didn't gamble. You didn't overspend irresponsibly. You didn't ignore your retirement accounts. You didn't accumulate destructive credit card debt. You simply expanded your life at the same pace your income expanded, which is exactly what most people do. And that's why this conversation matters. Because the long-term cost of choosing comfort over freedom is not a crisis. It's a narrowing of acceptable risk, a narrowing of professional flexibility, a narrowing of imagination. 10 years ago, your life could have moved in several directions. Now it can still move, but within a tighter corridor. You can change jobs as long as the salary stays high. You can move as long as the housing market cooperates. You can pivot as long as nothing interrupts cash flow for too long. Your freedom hasn't disappeared. It's been priced, and the price is continuity. Look at your bank app again. Not with anxiety, with clarity. How many months could you operate if income stopped? How many months could you deliberately choose instability? Not because of an emergency, but because of intention. That number, not your home value, not your car model, not your salary, is your freedom metric. And here's the subtle identity shift most people never articulate. There are two ways to feel safe. One is by increasing comfort. The other is by increasing flexibility. Comfort makes the present smoother. Flexibility makes the future negotiable. When you consistently choose higher fixed comfort, you are, quietly, rationally, choosing a future that must cooperate. A future where your employer must remain stable, where the economy must remain predictable, where your health must remain intact, where your income must remain consistent. That's not wrong. It's just a trade. The danger isn't in choosing comfort. The danger is choosing it, without recognizing what it replaces. Because over time, freedom stops feeling like something you gave up. It starts feeling like something you were never meant to have. And that's the real cost, not the $108,000. Not even the $260,000. But the gradual acceptance that your life can only move in safe directions. Once you see that, the conversation changes. You don't have to downsize tomorrow. You don't have to sell your house. You don't have to reject comfort. But you might start asking a different question before every upgrade. Is this increasing my quality of life? Or is it increasing the income my life requires? And that awareness alone can alter the trajectory of the next 10 years. By now, the realization isn't emotional. It's architectural. 10 years ago, when you chose the bigger house, the newer car, the upgraded life, you weren't choosing irresponsibility. You were choosing stability. But stability has a cost that doesn't show up in the closing documents. It shows up in the range of futures your life can tolerate. Look at your current structure. Open your mortgage app. Scroll through your car loan balance. Check your automatic subscription charges. Look at your insurance premiums. Glance at your 401k contribution rate. None of these are dramatic, but together they define the income your life requires to remain intact. And required income changes behavior. It shapes how firmly you negotiate your salary, how long you stay in a role that drains you, how quickly you leave a toxic environment, whether you experiment with something uncertain, whether you ever seriously consider working less. Freedom isn't the absence of responsibility. It's the presence of flexibility, the ability to absorb change without panic, the ability to say, "This no longer fits," and actually mean it. When fixed costs stay low relative to income, flexibility grows quietly in the background. It compounds just like investments do. When fixed costs rise with every raise, flexibility shrinks just as quietly, not overnight, but over years. Here's the subtle shift most people miss. Choosing comfort once doesn't remove freedom. Choosing higher required income repeatedly does. And eventually, you stop evaluating life based on what you want to build. You evaluate it based on what you must maintain. That's the long-term cost. Not poverty, not failure, but commitment to continuity. A life that works beautifully, as long as nothing significant disrupts it. If this conversation helped you see your own structure more clearly, take a moment to like the video. And if you want more discussions about how everyday financial decisions shape American life over time, subscribe to the channel. In the end, this isn't about rejecting comfort. It's about recognizing that every recurring expense is a design choice. And design choices determine mobility. The real question isn't whether you can afford the upgrade. It's whether you want to build a life that requires it. Because over time, you don't just own your lifestyle. Your lifestyle defines the version of you that can survive inside it.